Zenless Zone Zero is a good game. Blasphemy! Sorry. Zenless is a stage-based action combat gacha game from mihoyo, the developers of Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and some other games, but nobody cares about those games anymore, so let's move on. I've been playing Zenless non-stop for the last couple of days and want to share my thoughts. Let's start with combat. You're able to create teams of 3 and each individual character has an element: fire, ice, electric, ether, or physical, and can belong to one of a couple of different roles. You have attack, defense, and support, which are self-explanatory, as well as anomaly, which specializes in applying status effects, and stun, which specializes in filling up the stun gauge. Interestingly, there is no healer class. In fact, none of the launch characters can heal, which means any damage you take is for the most part permanent. There are ways to heal, but I'll explain them later. Combat is fairly simple, but incredibly satisfying in my opinion. Every character has a basic combo they can perform by tapping the attack button, 2 versions of their active skill, basic and an EX version if you have enough energy, an ultimate, a dodge, and a parry. You can also switch between your characters whenever you want, and this is where the fun begins. When an enemy attacks you, sometimes they will spark yellow. If you switch when this happens, you can perform a parry switch, not only changing to your next character, but also doing a powerful counter attack. Sometimes the enemy will spark red instead. This means instead of doing a parry, you will simply dodge the attack when you switch. But wait, there's more! Enemies also have a stun gauge you can fill up by attacking them with your various combat options. Once you fill it up, you can do an incredibly powerful chain attack. The game will go into slow-mo, and you can choose a character to do a switch attack. You can do this a total of 3 times. Characters are very simple on their own, so combat can feel very basic. However, once you start constantly counter switching and chain attacking alongside using your individual character skills and ultimates, the gameplay becomes immensely satisfying. Now, those were the universal mechanics that everyone has access to. Some characters, however, do have unique gimmicks that help them stand out. For example, Ellen has a unique run attack. Every character can run, but Ellen specifically will enter a unique mode where she gets access to an attack with a tap and charge version. The upcoming character Zhao Yun has 2 base combos, one by tapping attack and the other by holding attack. She also has this cool slide she can do in the middle of her combo by holding the right or left direction while tapping attack. What's really cool about this is that it's also considered a dodge, so if you time it correctly, you can perfectly dodge an enemy in the middle of your combo, which is dope as hell. Ben Bigger's skill can be held down to absorb multiple hits, then he can let go to cause a big fire explosion. Ambi has a unique attack she can perform by holding down the attack button during the 5th hit of her combo. She can also skip the startup animation of her skill by pressing the skill button during the 5th hit of her combo. Lycaon, or Lycaon, something like that, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, can charge all of his attacks to apply an ice status to them, etc, etc, etc. Like I said, characters don't have access to a lot of different mechanics, but there's enough quirks and gimmicks to make combat feel fun, engaging, and unique, especially when you start experimenting with different team comps. Something I didn't mention earlier when talking about character roles is the existence of factions. Every character belongs to a faction. For example, Anbi, Billy, Nakomata, and Nicole belong to the Cunning Hares faction. This is mainly used for team building. Every character has a unique passive they can activate when they are paired up with those who share the same element or faction. And for the majority of characters, that's where factions begin and end. However, there are 2 characters who take this mechanic to the next level. My girl Colita Bellabog and my main man Ben Bigger. When you pair these 2 in a team, Colita will get access to a unique, stronger combo finisher. where Ben will come in and plant down his big stick. Then Kolita will land on it and cause an explosion. You can also use your EX skill when Kolita lands on the stick to cause an even more powerful explosion. Not only that, Kolita gets access to a new, stronger ultimate where she teams up with Ben to deal massive fire damage and greatly fill up the stun gauge of all opponents caught in the explosion. To the best of my knowledge, Ben and Kolita are the only characters with this kind of synergy, but I don't have all of the characters, so feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong and there are other characters with this kind of synergy. I adore this mechanic. Not only is it dope as hell, it has a lot of potential with future characters if the developers decide to expand on the mechanic. But before I explain that, I need to make a quick detour. For as much as I think Zenless combat is fun, there is one big problem with it. For a good chunk of my playtime, I felt like the combat was missing something, a crucial ingredient, and after hours of playing, I finally figured it out. I'm playing on my PS5, and I realized that during combat, I never once pressed the circle button. Why? Simple, it doesn't do anything. Yep, you heard me right, an entire button is completely useless. Once I realized this, I finally understood why combat felt lacking, even though I did enjoy it. I have a couple of ideas for what they could do with the circle button, and one of them has to do with the synergy system. I think it would be really cool if characters who belong to the same faction had an exclusive team attack skill when paired with each other. For example, if you are playing as Nicole and your team has other Cunning Hair members, pressing circle will randomly call in one of them to do an attack, then leave. Something like this actually already exists in the game. During the Chapter 2 intermission, when you play as Zhou-Yun, Xing-Yi will randomly jump in and attack the enemies to help you out. I'm honestly not sure what caused it, but it was pretty cool. The same thing happens when you first visit Hollow Zero and you are joined by Miyabi's team. They will randomly jump in and attack the enemies to help you out. Having something like that happen when you press circle would be really fun in my opinion. Realistically, something like this will never be added, and honestly, that's okay. I like the synergy system as it is currently. However, like I said, Kolita and Ben are the only ones who have it. Hopefully with future updates, newer as well as older characters will get synergies. Synergies could actually be a good way to make old characters viable in the future. For example, let's say 3 years from now they release a new Cunning Hair's main DPS. They could give that character synergy with Nicole to extend her shelf life. Another idea worth bringing up for combat is the addition of air combos. I'm honestly shocked that this game doesn't have air combos, mostly because miHoYo's previous stage-based action game, Honkai Impact Bird, does have them. Another possibility for the circle button is to make it an air launcher. Tap circle to launch enemies into the air, hold circle to launch the enemy and yourself into the air. I also think it would be interesting if different characters had different options in the air. For example, a big heavy character like Ben won't have any air combos. Instead, he will jump into the air and then do a big spike with his stick to send enemies crashing into the ground. He won't have any options in the air, so he's strictly a ground unit. A fast, nimble character like Nakomata, however, will have a full-blown 6-hit combo that ends with a spike. However, if you use her EX skill, it will reset her combo so you can juggle the enemy in the air. Taking this concept to its natural extreme, the developers could release characters that specialize in air combat. Absolute monsters when performing air combos, but won't have any options when in the ground. Basically a reverse of Ben Bigger. This could create fun scenarios where you use Zhou-Yun to do a ground combo that ends with an air launcher, then switch to your air unit to deal massive damage, then spike the enemy back to earth and switch to Zhou-Yun to continue the combo. All that being said though, these are just fun suggestions for how I think the combat could improve. And hey, if you have any ideas for how you would improve the core combat, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I would love to read your guys' ideas. Such as it is, the current combat is fun. I really enjoy the constant switching, countering, and chain attacking. Miyabi, my beloved, please come soon, I need you! Next, let's talk about the story. It's fine. The main plot itself isn't super interesting, but I did enjoy it for what it was. The different companies, organizations, gangs, and factions constantly fighting and vying for power, and the main characters delving into conspiracies is fun. The hollow and ethereals are an interesting concept, and I'm definitely interested in seeing how that gets expanded upon and explored as the game progresses. Fun fact, did you know that the biggest hollow is actually on the moon? Yep, you heard me right, you can actually see it at night. I'm gonna call it right now, at some point in this game's lifespan, we will go to the moon and explore that hollow. The origin of the hollow is most likely located there. Kiana Castellana, perhaps? Or at the very least, some big, world-shattering lore reveal will happen there and we'll fight some crazy eldritch horror monster. Or cute anime girl. Or some unholy combination of the two, since, you know, anime. One of miHoYo's previous games, Hokai Gouken 2, literally had eldritch beings that looked like lollipops, so it's definitely not impossible for Zenless to do something like that. Zenless has a lot of fun and interesting concepts, and I'm interested in seeing how all of this gets expanded as the game progresses. Currently, there are 3 types of cutscenes. Your traditional light novel format, where characters stand there talking to each other. These fun comic book style scenes that I love. Since these are a collection of pictures, they're able to showcase a lot of fun locations, poses, faces, and action sequences. And lastly, of course, you have the big, bombastic, super high quality cutscenes. Like I said, the main story is fine, nothing mind-blowing, but it is enjoyable. However, it has the exact same problem that every miHoYo game has. The visual novel cutscenes are far too long. Some of these scenes last for 20 plus minutes. Now, if you've played the game, you might be a little confused. What are you talking about? None of the cutscenes are 20 minutes long? Well, yes, they are. miHoYo does a small trick where they will have you watch a 5-minute scene that will end, then make you walk for 10 seconds, let's say, in order to talk to another character or activate some kind of trigger to play another 5-minute scene. If you remove all of these 10-second intermissions and simply stack all of these scenes on top of each other, these scenes will easily reach 20 minutes, if not more. Part of me doesn't mind watching these scenes because the character interactions themselves are immensely enjoyable. Zenless truly is a masterclass in character writing. Every character has a distinct personality and fun little quirks that help them stand out. Nicole is money hungry, which might seem materialistic on the surface, but once you learn her backstory, you'll realize there's a much deeper reason for her obsession. Anby is a very monotone, goal-focused girl who has trouble reading social cues and is in love with burgers. Billy loves bootleg Power Rangers and is trying his damnedest to be heroes like them, etc, etc. Watching all of these fun, quirky, distinct personalities constantly bantering with each other is very enjoyable. However, for as much as I love these interactions, Zenless has the exact same problem that every miHoYo game has. These cutscenes last far too long, and there's a couple of reasons as to why this is a problem. The first problem is that these scenes are long for the sake of being long. You could cut 50% of these scenes and nothing of value would be lost. A lot of scenes where characters are explaining the plot and why things are happening last for an eternity because the writers feel the need to over-explain things. A plot point that could have been delivered in 1 minute is stretched to 5 minutes of constant droning. And for as much as I love the character interactions, sometimes these scenes also go on for far too long, to the point where I just start to lose interest and my eyes glaze over. The pacing and overall enjoyment of the story would heavily benefit from some cutting of the fat. Like I mentioned earlier, some of these scenes last for 20 minutes, if not longer, when in reality they don't need to. They could very easily convey the exact same information in 10 minutes of streamlined cutscenes, and not only would nothing of value be lost, the overall experience would be drastically better. In order to explain the second problem with the story, I'm going to have to take another small detour and talk about story missions. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Zenless is a stage-based game. Story missions specifically are cut into 2 distinct modes, TV exploration and combat zones. The TV system is essentially a maze that you can explore and engage with various puzzles, story scenes, and a multitude of various unique tiles: money, traps, special events, enemies, upgrades, healing zones, and so much more. The TV system is surprisingly well made and fleshed out, and truth be told, in and of itself, I quite enjoy it. However, it isn't without its faults. The main problem is simply that we spend far too much time engaging with this system when playing the main story. Most of the story is watching 20-minute long cutscenes and looking at TV screens. We barely get to actually use the core combat, and even when we are allowed to fight enemies, these combat stages are criminally short, lasting on average 1 or 2 minutes. Not only that, the main story TV segments are heavily scripted. We aren't so much exploring a fun maze, rather we are just following the yellow brick road set before us. Also, this very specific situation happens a lot where a cutscene will end, we move 5 tiles on the TV, and then another long cutscene will play. Basically, it's the intermission trick that I mentioned mihoyo really likes to do earlier. Zenless is an action game at its core, and so I want to spend most of my time fighting enemies, but the story seemingly made it its life mission to not let me do that. This issue isn't exclusive to missions though. Zenless has hub areas that you can run around in, and I'll share my thoughts on those later. Most of your time in these hub areas will be as part of the main story, meaning you will be forced to go from point A to B to be showered by constant cutscenes. And finally, all of the side game modes the game has, the farming stages and in-game content, are very slowly unlocked. It took me about 20 hours of playtime in order to slowly unlock all of the different game modes by progressing the main story. Basically, after 30 plus hours of playing Zenless, 80% was watching story cutscenes, 15% was using the TV system, and 5% playing the core combat. For as much as I like the story and characters, this is absolutely ridiculous and, quite frankly, unacceptable. The new player experience is an absolute nightmare as it currently is. Essentially, you are forced to play a 20-hour long tutorial. I think Zenless is a fun game worth checking out, but the fact that the player is held in a suffocating leash for 20 plus hours in order to reach a point where you can freely enjoy the core combat is not okay. The developers 100,000% need to revisit and change the new player experience, because such as it is, the biggest obstacle for keeping new players is the main story and how insanely long it takes to unlock the various game modes. Speaking of game modes, first we have the various resource stages. These are actually kind of interesting. The way it works is that you can build a deck of 5 enemies. The more you add, the more stamina required to complete the stage, and the more resources you get. You also have your traditional boss fights you can complete in order to get more valuable resources, and of course, equipment stages. I haven't engaged with the equipment system of Zenless much, so I can't really say if it's good or not, but if it's anything like Genshin or Star Rail, then it will probably be an absolute nightmare. In terms of endgame, there is the Shiyu defense. This is a mode where you take on multiple floors of enemies with different teams. The higher the floor, the stronger the enemies. And as the game progresses, this will most likely delve into being a damage and new character check. These tower game modes in previous mihoyo games are usually centered around the newest character. For example, when Miyabi eventually releases, she will be very strong in the tower, and then the character that releases after her will be really strong in the tower, so on and so forth. Basically, Shiyu defense will most likely just eventually become a game mode where you either have enough damage to complete it or you don't. Next up is Hollow Zero, which is a really fun roguelike game mode. This takes full advantage of the TV system and I quite enjoy it. Hollow Zero is divided into a couple of different levels, and each level has multiple difficulties as well as a specific gimmick associated with them. For example, one of them has a loan shark that will give you money which you can use to buy various upgrades. However, you need to make sure you have enough money to pay him back whatever he gave you at the end of your run. If you don't pay him back, you will be heavily punished. If I'm going to be completely honest, I think the TV system should have been exclusive to Hollow Zero. Sure, it's fun and I enjoy it, but it is far too prevalent in the main story. Speaking of, the developers have confirmed that they plan on slowly phasing out the TV system from the game. What exactly this means is a little unclear, but I do have an idea. There is a very specific type of combat stage called Rally that you can play. There aren't very many, but they are fun. These are basically stages where we run around and solve puzzles and fight various enemies. They are decently long, lasting at bare minimum 5 minutes if not more, and for some bizarre reason, these are exclusively side content. You will never play a stage like this in the main story. And so my speculation is that the developers will slowly introduce more and more of these rally type stages to the main story. The puzzles and interactions that would have taken place in the TV system will instead happen in rally stages, which would be perfect, especially if they retroactively implement them into the first 3 chapters that the game launched with, in order to help improve the new player experience. Now let's talk about the hub areas. Honestly, there isn't much to say. They're fine. You can talk to various NPCs in order to accept side quests, or you can talk to them to get small little stories with them. For example, there was one with a cop and her partner that I really liked. Her partner is usually a strong, brave man, but at night he gets really scared, which annoys her. You can talk to both of them to see their little side story play out, and there's a bunch of side stories like that. There's also a couple of vendors. Most importantly, we have the noodle shop, which will give you small upgrades depending on which dish you order. Increased fire damage, increased HP, that kind of thing. We also have the coffee guy. Coffee will not only give you 60 extra stamina, which is insane, you will also get more of a specific resource when completing a resource stage, depending on which coffee you drink. Something that I really like about the hub areas is the wide variety of unique NPC models. 30 hours into the game and I am still flabbergasted when I run into NPCs with designs I've never seen before. The world truly does feel alive because I'm not constantly seeing the exact same 2 models over and over again like most other gachas. Also, you can randomly see and talk to the playable characters as well as some non-playable characters. For example, I randomly ran into a cool looking biker dude, and at first I thought he was just like a really unique NPC, but then I realized he looked really familiar, and then it hit me. He's the guy from the trailer. He's part of the biker gang, and I was like, whoa, what the hell? A non-playable, or should I say a future playable character is just randomly hanging out. That was really cool to see. At first, these interactions are just random fluff, but eventually you'll unlock a trust system. You can invite a character or randomly bump into them in the hub world and talk to them, and depending on what you say, you can raise their trust, and eventually you'll unlock a background of that character that you can use in the main menu, which is pretty cool. Currently not everybody has a background, but presumably they'll add more as the game progresses. And can I just say, I really like the overall style and vibe of this game. Sure, I might not like every character design, but I cannot deny the fact that everyone is dripping with raw swagger. I'm not gonna go any deeper than that, I just think the game is really cool. And finally, let's talk about the gacha system. Honestly, I don't have much to say about it. The game just came out, so it's hard to say how free-to-play friendly it's going to be in the long run. A week into the game, I was able to do 110 summons on the standard banner simply from all of the free summons they gave out through the events as well as playing the game. And I currently have enough premium currency for 83 pulls on the premium banners, which is pretty good considering it's only been a week as of me writing this. The banners themselves are the same as Star Rail. Character banner has a 50-50 pity system at 90 summons, meaning you are guaranteed to get a 5-star at 90 pulls if you haven't gotten one yet. However, it's a 50% chance to get the featured 5-star or one of the permanent 5-stars. If you get an off-rate 5-star, the next time you get a 5-star, it is guaranteed to be the premium character. Weapon banner works the exact same, except its pity is at 80 instead of 90. And lastly, we have the final gameplay mechanic I have yet to talk about. Bang Boo are these adorable little guys, and you can actually use them in combat. They basically function as a pet. You can't directly control them, instead they will automatically help you in combat. You can get them by summoning on the Bang Boo banner, however they are completely free to play. You cannot use money or premium currency to summon. Instead, you get the unique Bang Boo banner summon currency by playing the game, or through events, which is shocking to be honest. The developers could have easily used these little guys as a way to try and drain players of their money, but they chose not to. Each Bang Boo does something different, some do damage, others will buff you, and others will heal you. Remember how all the way at the beginning of the video I mentioned there was no healer class, but there was a way to heal? Well, you can heal during the TV system by stepping on one of the healing tiles or using a healing item, or by having one of the Bang Boos that heal like the avocado. And with that, we have finally come full circle. There probably is more I could say about this game, but at a certain point I would be talking simply for the sake of talking. Zenless Zone Zero is a really frustrating game, to be honest. I enjoy the combat, the style is immaculate, the world and character interactions are amazing, and Miyabi! Need I say more? But the fact that the game forces you to play what is, for all intents and purposes, a 20-hour long tutorial is infuriating. A part of me really wants to recommend this game, but the other part of me is saying, goddamn, 20 hours, huh? All of that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, will you play Zenless? If you already have, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Feel free to leave a like, dislike, subscribe, or don't. It's up to you, and I will see you guys later. Bye bye.